Hello, I'm Kate Fenner, and in this Masterclass training series, 3 Steps to Stopping Shying, I'm going to show you how you can completely transform the way you work with your horse, prioritizing relaxation and understanding and building your own confidence at every turn. I'm so pleased you're here because today we're going to talk about what is probably the most important and most overlooked aspect of horse training, and that is relaxation. Riders across the world report that shying or spooking is the most troublesome, unwanted and dangerous behavior that they experience. Further, it's often accompanied by a very sudden change in direction and even a buck. Shying is the most likely behavior to unseat a rider. Over the 3 decades that I've been coaching riders and training horses, properly addressing relaxation has been the one missing ingredient that, when done correctly, has immediately stopped shying and transformed both horse and rider in ways they never thought possible. Do you ever worry about jumping on and going for a ride if your horse has been off for a while? Is your horse sometimes scared of its own shadow? Do you worry about going out on the trail in case you come across something unexpected? Do you ever wish your horse was a little less anxious or would seem to trust you more? Do you wonder if you're not good enough or experienced enough for your horse and you think you should send it out to a trainer to ride through it or to teach it what it needs to know to be a safe and enjoyable ride? Or perhaps you think you just need a bit more confidence or the horse that's been there, done that. If you answered yes to any of these questions, then you're in the right place. In this masterclass, I'm going to explain why horses shy and why relaxation is the pivotal component to successful training and riding. How you can get that in your horse without sending your horse out to a trainer. In this first video, I'm going to explain how I came to realize the importance of starting with relaxation and the journey I took to get there. In the second video, we'll discuss the engagement zone and working and riding your horse in what I call the bubble. In video 3, we're going to use what we've learned to break down a lesson and teach your horse a really useful thing. And after that video, you'll be able to go out and teach your own horse. You're going to love that one, I know. And finally, in video 4, I'm going to give you a roadmap to show you exactly how you can do this yourself. The roadmap's going to show you how you can teach your horse flying changes using the building blocks we've learned here. Now, you may not be ready or even want to teach flying changes, but that doesn't really matter. The building blocks are the same for whatever you want to teach. And in this masterclass, we're going to talk about how you break those down and how you implement them. And it will put the fun back in your riding for you and your horse. So stick with me, this is going to be great. So where did I start? It was this very lack of relaxation that first led me on my journey over 20 years ago to find a better way to train my horses. My horse was big in stature, but sadly lacking in bravado. He wasn't too bad in the arena, but he would shy so much on the trail that I barely ventured out with him. One day in Singapore, competing in a Rolex International dressage competition, during my final ride, a dressage to music event, I remember my Danish instructor yelling at me, "Pick him up! Don't let him change frame!" as I'm leaving the warm-up arena. I felt like I was carrying a 16 two-hand off-the-track thoroughbred, somehow between my legs being wrapped around him and my hands holding him in place. I was holding his head and neck in place. Now, we won this event and it was a large international competition, but the judge said in her comments, "Horse looks beautiful on the outside, but I fear ready to explode on the inside." And she'd hit the nail on the head. As I released the rein after the final salute in that arena, I knew there must be a better way, a way of training that focused first and foremost with relaxation and self-carriage, where I didn't have to hold my horse together, where the horse understood and enjoyed the job, be it a dressage test, a jumping course, or a trail ride. But while I knew that I could leave the arena on a long rein with my horse, I also knew there was no way I could take this horse with the current level of relaxation and understanding of what I was asking as a rider out on a trail ride through the jungle next door to the competition venue. Well, perhaps I could have if I'd lunged in for 45 minutes first, but I really didn't want to exhaust my horse into submission. And that would still feel like I was simply crossing my fingers, hoping for the best, because how would I know when he was tired enough not to shy at things? And if I did that today, surely he'd just get fitter, so tomorrow I'd have to lunge in for even longer. No, I needed to find a system to educate my horse and thus allow my horse to relax. A system that made sense to me so that I could teach it to my horse myself and not have to rely on someone else to train my horse for me. And so my journey began. Just a few weeks after that Rolex International competition, my family and I were due to move to the US. And while this might not have been my first choice of destination, I did appreciate the fact that there were so many great trainers to learn from there, and I set about trying to find the right one to help me learn and grow in the right direction. I set out exactly what I was looking for this, and this is what it was. I wanted a horse that was relaxed and enjoyed what we were doing together, be it competitive riding, pleasure on the trail, or just spending time on the ground together. I knew I still wanted to compete, but I also spent 7 hours a day with my horses. I was the only person in Singapore at the time that competed in dressage, show jumping, and polo. So I was spending a lot of time at the stables. I wanted a horse that didn't spook or shy, a predictable horse that I didn't feel I was taking my life into my hands every time I mounted, or that I had to lunge before I rode just to take the edge off. I understood that to get relaxation, I needed the horse to truly understand and be obedient to the cues I was given. I'd always found much of what I was told by my dressage instructor rather confusing and hard to define. Like, what is a good contact? How can you see or feel inside leg to outside rein? And if you're using those things, when does the horse get a release of pressure? Another one's the half halt. Ask 10 different instructors to define a half halt and give you the cues and reasons to achieve it, and you get 10 different answers. No wonder I had difficulty explaining that to my horse if I didn't understand it myself. And surely, do I really need to rebalance my horse or tell him something's about to happen when I'm riding? Shouldn't my horse always be engaged with me as the rider and the director of energy? Really, particularly when I'm training something specific, I want my horse to always be in that mental place. I'll call it the engagement zone or the bubble of communication, where the horse is in self-carriage and waiting for a signal from me to change something. I shouldn't need to wake him up first or rebalance him first. I wanted to be more confident as a rider, but understood this would first mean that I needed a more confident horse. Confidence is a funny thing, and we talk about rider confidence a lot, but what is it really? I like to define it as knowing what might happen next. Now, we can't know exactly what might happen. I was riding in the arena not long ago, and a kangaroo came out of nowhere, hopped over the fence right in front of my stallion, across the arena and out the other side at B. Did my horse react? No. Other than raise its head and watch the kangaroo's path, it didn't react at all. And we're going to talk about why it didn't later in the masterclass. So confidence comes from knowing what might happen next. For the horse, confidence comes from understanding the cues and signals we use as riders. The correct use of combined reinforcement, breaking lessons down into manageable chunks, building on a strong foundation, and teaching using clear, repeatable patterns. This will build a confident horse, and once I have that, I too can have confidence as a rider because my horse then becomes more predictable. I know what might happen next. Of course, the biggest and most important element in building confidence is training your own horse. And this is what this masterclass is all about. Showing you how you can train your own horse to really skyrocket your riding confidence. And it's not a breathing exercise, meditation, desensitization, or wishful thinking. It's evidence-based, and it's both ethical and sustainable. And it's training that your horse will love. And it will be the missing piece of that jigsaw if you're anything like me, you've been looking for a long time. After arriving in the States, I quickly investigated trainers. There were a lot on offer, ranging from those slavishly following the German training scale to those talking about magic and harmony, but very few met my selection criteria. John and Josh Lyons were the exception. There was no magic promises here. Josh Lyons spoke about conditioned response, which is a learning theory term used to describe how to teach and how the horse learns during training. At the turn of the century, John was streets ahead of his time, and he was the answer I'd been looking for. Understand how the horse learns and how to break any lesson down so that you build a confident and relaxed horse. This was gold, and I knew I had to do his course. Naturally, this was the most involved and lengthy course available, and I ended up bringing a horse from Australia and another, a retired Argentinian polo pony from Singapore, over to Colorado for 8 months while I completed the training with John and Josh Lyons. What an incredible experience that was, just amazing in every way. I then moved back to the UK, just outside Sevenoaks in Kent, and set up Equine Perfection, where I adapted everything I'd learned in Colorado to the horse rider population in England. I spent 3 years in the UK, taking horses in for training and retraining and starting under saddle, conducting clinics and giving demonstrations, and in 2005, finally moved back home to Australia. Here, again, I took horses in for training and continued with clinics and demonstrations. But I began to realize those owners that really did their homework and started training their horses themselves, rather than watching me do it or barely working on the horses between lessons, were making tremendous and lasting progress when compared to the others. These engaged owners and riders had relaxed horses that loved to learn and were eagerly working through the new lessons, whereas horses that were sent to me for training always left with ecstatically happy owners and performing over and above expectations, but almost always a week, a month, or 6 months later, owners ran into problems. The horses started to behave differently or fell back into old habits. Of course, the reasons this was happening were obvious. Horses are not computers. You can't simply install new software and off you go. Horses are not machines. They don't have buttons. They have learned responses to cues, and they're learning all the time, whether we realize it or not. Those riders that hadn't trained their own horses didn't understand how the horses had learned the lessons, and thus didn't see things going wrong right at the beginning when the horse started trialing new behaviors. Let's say, for example, that you send your horse to me to teach flying changes. I say, great, because it's one of my favorite lessons to teach. And off I go and get started. Your horse has a good walk, trot and canter, but carries its head quite high in the canter, finding it difficult to relax and lift its back, which is going to make the movement difficult and may be the reason your horse always changes in front and not behind when asked for a flying change. So no problem. I begin by teaching the horse give to the bit and teach your horse about self-carriage and softness in the bridle and frame. I then go on to teach shoulder control because I need to be able to stop the shoulders moving before I teach the hindquarter control. The flying change comes from the hindquarters, so that is what I need to be able to control. Finally, I teach hindquarter control and lateral work, and that will give me the basis of a good pattern to teach the flying changes. Okay, so I do all that. In the end, after a week with me, your horse now travels in frame all the time, is soft and light and responsive in the bridle, and has great flying changes. Sadly, you take the horse home and continue to ride the same way as you did before sending the horse to me for training, and pretty soon those postural and flying changes appear to have gone. So why is this? Well, when you train a horse, you build what I call a bubble of communication. This is where the horse is in the engagement zone, something we'll talk about next time, and focused on you and the cues that you're giving him or her. But that bubble belongs to the person that trains the horse or trains that maneuver. I can't give you the bubble. It's something you have to build for yourself. Your cues are going to be slightly different from mine, and your release will be slightly different from mine. Horses come to the level of the rider. The horse may get a lot better and while it's out at the trainer, but when it comes home, the two of you have to equalize. You'll probably improve a bit and the horse will get a bit worse. This is why it's so important that you learn to train your own horse. Any horse will revert to the level of the rider. Even a schoolmaster will not continue to perform in the same way when the rider is unaware of how the lessons were taught in the first place. And this is exactly what I found, having moved back to Australia and continued taking horses in for training. And that's why I stopped doing that entirely, to devote all of my time to making real and lasting changes for riders and their horses by teaching them to train their own horses. And like today's video, it all starts with relaxation. It took me a few years to really cement what I thought was missing from how we are currently both training horses and riders. And in 2009, I decided to take a very deep dive into this and return to university to study equine science. Here, I deepened my understanding of horse anatomy, horse rider biomechanics, equine cognition and learning, and developed a great love of equine research. My honours project, which involved 100 horses, investigated how to best prepare a horse for a lesson and the horse's experience of learning a new task. I did some further investigation into horses' experience of being ridden with a study about the effects of noseband tightness on both physiological and behavioural parameters. All of this led me in 2017 to enrol in a PhD in equine training and welfare with the University of Sydney's Veterinary Science faculty. I'm completing that degree now, and my project is called EBARC, which is the Equine Behaviour Assessment and Research Questionnaire, which is a longitudinal investigation into training, management and behaviour. If you haven't seen EBARC yet, I really encourage you to go along and get involved with it. It's a citizen science project and we really want your input. As I embarked on academia to find some answers I'd been searching for, I also realised that I needed to be able to help more people by being able to teach them to train their own horses, and Can Do Equine went online. Today, all of my training is available online, and we'll talk a little bit more about the program in the final video of this series. So you'll remember that I promised you a roadmap for teaching flying changes at the end of this masterclass. And next time, we're going to take a deep dive into how to break a lesson down to the 4 basic principles of learning. How to target relaxation using what is probably the most useful, simple lesson I ever teach. I promise it'll change the way you understand training. You never knew it could be this easy or this fun. Leave me a comment below and tell me about your horse, about the horse you're going to be using for the training during this masterclass. Is your horse young or old? What breed is it? Is there anything in particular you would like to work on during the masterclass? And tell me, does your horse shy a lot or not? Let's hear about it.